Good evening. I'm happy for all of you that came. Some of you are new. And we are very excited this evening that we have Alzheimer's Association representatives here. We actually have 3 people. I'm going to just say that Ralph and Molly Richardson are our speakers. I'm going to let them tell a little bit about themselves as well as our other guests that we have here. But we are so, again, grateful to the Alzheimer's Association and to you both for being willing to speak with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no clue where I am. all I know is where I came from. But the interstate will get us back. But we're Ralph and Molly Richards, and we are community educators with the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Indiana, as well as community advised board members for the Indiana Alzheimer's Disease and Research Center. That's part of the Indiana University School of Medicine. So we do both. We enter the didactics, we share and we present, but we also enter the research. And I think that's the next step. That's where we should be. We can only teach so much, but we have to get into the part that deals primarily with treating. Molly and I are going to go back and forth on this. Is this going to go to sleep on us? If we don't advance it, will it?
Yes, I will. I'll just run up there and
Oh, is it? Yeah. It's on your settings.
yes. Can you do something to make that not happen?
There's a lot. Oh, you fix it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right. We're going to talk real fast. We'll catch up.
Okay, my story is I'll introduce myself. As I said, my name is Molly, and I'm a retired occupational therapist. And for the last 30 years of my career, I worked primarily in long-term care, and worked as the director of rehabilitation programs, and also the memory care service line manager, which meant I was responsible for the education of about 1,000 employees. The last place I worked, which I worked there for 19 years in Western New York. And so, like Ralph said, we're on the board, the Alzheimer's board of directors here. We're also on the board of directors in Rochester, New York. And so, I was vice chair of the board there. And then, we're working with Indiana University Alzheimer's Disease and Research Center, and Memory Advocates Peers are on their board. That's out of New York City. And the reason I'm passionate about Alzheimer's and other memory disorders, because when I was 17 years old and getting ready to go to college, my father came home from work and said he was let go because he couldn't remember how to do his job. Now at 17, I had no idea what it was about. I had a 9-year-old brother, an 18-year-old brother, and a 19-year-old brother. My mother had to go to work, and all the neighbors said I shouldn't go to college. I was on my way to Bloomington. They said I shouldn't go, but my mom said for me to go, so I went. I don't know where the money came from. I don't know what happened, but I only spent that 1 year on campus and then came home and worked part-time. And no, worked full-time in school part-time and helped my mom take care of my dad. And of course, I did eventually graduate and went on to get a master's later on. That's a little bit about my background.
Before we go any further, I want to introduce Jacob E. Davis, who he's one of our new volunteers, and he wanted to come out and see how not to do. Okay, all right. Each time I'm reminded, when I stand in front of a group of people, I'm reminded of the minor prophet Hosea, 4th chapter, 6th verse. It says, "For my people perish because of lack of knowledge." And this is what we see all the time when we go through. People do not have the knowledge. And the thing is that they end up having all the symptoms of memory disorder and do absolutely nothing about it. So here what we're going to do today is share some information with you. This particular presentation is Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia. Molly's going to see whether or not there's, I'll get 4 feet of that, but Molly wants me to give our objectives, and she's going to ask me yours. I get that backwards all the time. Thanks, Molly. Molly keeps me calibrated. Okay. Here's our objectives. That's conclusion, we're going to compare Alzheimer's disease with dementia. So many times people get that mixed up. They're different. We're going to recognize how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain, as well as listing the risk factors of Alzheimer's disease. Molly's going to identify the stages of the disease and recognizing the current Federal Drug Administration approved treatments. And we'll describe how scientists are working to advance research, as well as some resources that are available through the Alzheimer's Association. Molly?
Now, I'd like to know what questions you have, so that we can make sure that we cover those during the presentation.
Anybody have any specific questions for?
Something you always wanted to know but was afraid to ask.
No, everybody's so shy. Yes.
Well, the difference with this Alzheimer's and dementia between stress-induced memory loss, which we all experience, but as we age, it's everybody believe that you are getting Alzheimer's. Generally speaking, Alzheimer's is the
Okay, so like age-associated memory impairment,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
normal for aging and what's not normal
now
for
it's
aging?
normal for everybody, I think.
All right, we're gonna talk about that. Thank you. Anybody? Yes, sir.
What are the main supports that Alzheimer's caregivers need? So how can we support them as well?
Good question. Okay. We're going to capture that. I think that needs to be discussed. Anyone else?
Yes.
ma'am.
Are there any studies on diet and Alzheimer's
Yes.
dementia? Okay, good.
Yeah. One of the great things about this is focused primarily on understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. But we're going to design it to fit the audience. You're asking for some specific questions that we're going to give that to you. Answers to today. Anyone else?
I'm all excited now.
Okay.
Can I just go ahead and do this one step?
Yes.
Okay, because it's not a part of the presentation. So this is one of my favorite topics. It's called Healthy Living. The presentation is Healthy Living for the Brain and Body, but the nutrition part basically says that we need to eat fruits and vegetables. We need to reduce the amount of red meats and that we eat and fats. Some fatty fish is okay. Nuts and grains, fast foods out the door, processed foods out the door. Anything that comes in a box probably isn't good to eat. You want to do fresh, because of my own health issues, I do, if I do meat, I try to get, grass-fed or wild caught fish and what are the vegetables, and the fruits? We do,
The leafy vegetables, which is...
right, but we do organic. Thank you. We do organic. And just real quick, do you know what the numbers mean of those little stamps on your fruit, those little stickers on your fruit? Do you know what that means?
Everybody ever notice it?
Have you ever noticed? I never noticed it before. Okay, they have numbers on them, and the only number you need to be aware of is the first number. 9 means it's organic. If it's a 4 or below, it has pesticides and things in it. So I try to avoid those. But then there's a clean 15 and the dirty dozen, and you can look that up. Clean 15, dirty dozen. The clean 15 are things that don't have to be organic, that have thick skins like watermelon and cantaloupe and things like that. Those are clean 15. Dirty dozen would be things like strawberries, things like that. Like bananas don't have to be organic because the skin is thick enough. So it's a dirty dozen and a clean 15. So yes, there are specific things that you should eat and not eat. And it's good for your brain health because some of the wrong things can cause inflammation, not just in your brain but throughout your body. But inflammation in the brain can cause a deterioration of your brain tissues and your synapses aren't working and everything. So excellent question, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Real quick, you said 9 means organic, what did 4 mean, 4 or below?
Well, that is not organic.
Oh, just-
I mainly do 9s. I don't even know if I do 8s, but I definitely try to avoid anything like 5, 4, 3, because they have a lot of pesticides.
Okay.
I'm just saying the scan.
Okay, I wanted to state real quick or something. I get 50 cents for every question that you ask, and Paul is giving us 50 cents for every question. Just kidding. Let me share something with you. This is something that I wish I had known when I was rearing my children. The human brain doesn't totally mature until age 25, around 25 years of age. And then as we go older, we find out we do things a little different. That is why children whose brain has not completely developed make decisions based on emotions. And we, our brain matures, hopefully, are making decisions based on consequences. I said, well, I wish I had known that when my kids did different things, you know. I did the same thing too. But as we age, we find out we go through what we call age-associated memory impairment. So, but we forget things. We get up and go to a room and we say, well, why did I come into this room? And then we have to go back out, right? Is that normal? I don't know. Probably not. You may misplace your keys. And you say, what is this key used for? But you do know, eventually you'll know, but if you didn't know what they were, then there'd be something really serious. But let's talk about Alzheimer's and dementia. There's a lot of impact, a lot of information on Alzheimer's today, and we're going to go through some factoids, but I want you to, we're going to start one of my favorite TV programs, is Jeopardy. Anyone love Jeopardy? I love Jeopardy. I love Jeopardy. So we're going to test your knowledge today, and we want to ask you this question. Approximately how many Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's? Does anyone know? I'd like to take a guess. I guess.
18.
I see some hands and fingers going on with hands.
What'd you say?
You have to say what is.
What is
What? What is 6 million? Okay, let's say more than 6 million, okay?
She said 8.
She said 8 million.
Okay, that's somebody else.
I said
She said 6, okay.
6.
Yeah, okay, so there are more than 6 million people with this disease. All right? You got that correct. Let's go to the next one. And the next question is simply this. How many Americans provide unpaid care? Now, they're giving care to their loved ones or friends with this disease, people living with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Is it 8 million, over 11 million, 14 million, or more than 18 million? Anyone have that figure? Now, I'm talking about people that have to quit their job because they have to take care of their parents. People have, they can only work part-time, they can work and take care of their loved one too. How about, let's take a guess, and let's say, what is 11 million? 11 million, that's a lot, isn't it? Of people that's being cared for, and that's what we know about. So I want you to watch this factoid here. It will absolutely blow your mind. But something happened a few years ago that we went through. What was that called?
COVID.
COVID. And they kind of moved us out of 6th place and moved us to 7. Now we're back in 6th place now. The pandemic had its pluses, if there's such things as that, because it revealed a lot of things that we should be doing and that we're not doing. If we don't put a cure, find a cure with this disease, it will actually bankrupt our health care. So that's why a lot of money is going into the research. So let's talk about Alzheimer's and dementia. Okay, let's take acknowledge again. This is my Jeopardy test here. Here's one for you. Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process. True or false?
False.
False. It is not intended for us to have any type of dementia or anything. It is as a result of what we eat and what we don't do in our life. Don't exercise, don't stimulate the neurons in our brain. What happened, and then it ends up this. So it's false. True. Okay, so let's go with another question here. Younger people than age 65 can get Alzheimer's. True or false? True. Now, not many people get that.
Yeah, the youngest person that I know of diagnosed in Indiana was 28. The youngest people that I ever had contact with or treated, well, there was a young lady who was 35. I didn't treat her, but she was like wandering in our department all the time. She's 35. And then I treated people in their early 40s.
So now we have a young onset of Alzheimer's, people in their 40s. We're learning every day something new about Alzheimer's that we didn't know before. But I'm going to let us listen to the expert. The expert is going to give us some information.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain, or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
Frontotemporal dementia, devastating. It affects the frontal part of the brain as well as the temporal part. Who do we know that's recently been diagnosed? Bruce Willis. That's not a good dementia to have. Also, Lewy body. Robin Williams was the one. He committed suicide, but he had Lewy body dementia. These are devastating type dementias, but we always talk about Alzheimer's. Now let me share one thing with you we're finding out. People that have Alzheimer's, particularly when they get to the age of in their 80s, they usually have what we call mixed dementia. In other words, they'll have Alzheimer's, but they'll have also maybe Parkinson's dementia, or they may have Lewy body dementia, or they may have frontotemporal dementia. It's usually not one type of dementia that they do have. So then, why is it important to have an accurate diagnosis? Well, as you see here, there are different types of diseases. You see chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That's your football players and all those had banging their heads. That's what happened to them. Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease. That's the mad cow disease. Get hold of the mad cow, that's what happens to them. But I want you to look at all the different dementias there. And also there is HIV dementia and alcohol dementia. So that tells us one thing. Alzheimer's is a disease. The symptoms that are related to it, that is memory loss, word finding, and all those things, those are really symptoms. And that's what we call dementia. Dementia is a condition. It's not a disease. Because if a person has memory decline, or if they have difficulty finding words, then that is termed dementia. So we need to find out what the disease is. In this case, it would be Alzheimer's. Okay, everybody with me on that? So if you go to the hospital, somebody says, well, what is Mary? What's wrong with Mary? Well, she's in the hospital with dementia. Then you ask, well, what is the disease? Because you didn't tell them, you just only told them the condition, you know? Okay. All right, let's continue on here. I'm not doing here. I've got pretty good plan of dexterity here. Okay, here we go. Recap. Dementia is just a general term for collective of symptoms. That's what we said. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia, and it's not normal. Now let me share with you this. When I define Alzheimer's, we can say it is a neurological disease. It's progressive, it's destructive, it's a neurological disease that not only affects memory, but it also affects mobility. It also affects the sensory, eyes, nose, ears, all of that. But we forget about that. So it controls anything it invades the brain will be affected outwardly. So when you look at Alzheimer's, it affects primarily the hippocampus of the brain. Maybe I can show you the hippocampus area anyway. See this brain? This is my brain here. So in this area, can you see the cursor there? That's actually in that area. That's in the limbic system. It is the hippocampus. It is responsible for memory, short-term and long-term memory. So if you're young and you're getting all this information, it's going in long-term memory. But if you have Alzheimer's, somehow the plaques and tangles, which are characteristic of Alzheimer's, they accumulate around that hippocampus and will not allow information to get through. That's why people with Alzheimer's can tell you what they did 40 years ago, but they couldn't tell you what they had for breakfast 2 minutes ago, because it didn't get into the hippocampus. So the overall structure of the brain, we as adults, our brain weighs 3 to 4 pounds. When a person goes through Alzheimer's, when they finally die, it only weighs 1.5 pounds. So you can see the destruction of it. Okay, let's see here. I think we need another expert here to come and give us some information.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
These are MRI images that you see there. Okay, I'm going to kind of go through here. And I want to talk about the risk factors. What are some of the risk factors? Well, let's talk about that. Okay, we're testing our knowledge again. Here's the risk factors. This is a question for you. What is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? Is it genetics? Is it familial, family history? Or is it age? Now we can conclude this. All 3 are known risk factors. Which is the greater? Age.
Family history.
Age is the greater, because at age 65, you'll start seeing those changes in memory and so forth. But we have to understand this. When there are outward signs of Alzheimer's at 65 years of age, for an example, it started 20 years earlier, but we never knew it. So this didn't start overnight. It started 15, 20 years prior to that. So at age. And every 5 years, 65, 70, your risk doubles. Another 5 years, your risk doubles, your age. So it's significant that we keep our brain healthy. Okay.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
About the risk factors? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, one of the things,
You're fine.
okay, one of the things that we weren't aware of when we, at our church in Rochester, we had people that had changes in behavior. Like one of the Sunday school, when he was teaching Sunday school, one of his class members, all of a sudden would just start arguing about everything that was being said in the scriptures and all that. And we had another member that would just blurt out in the church business meetings. And then I served as a deaconess in one of our meetings, one of the ladies, because he was in charge of the deacons, called my husband a liar. It was so out of character. And I was like, what is wrong? But I thought, well, you know, I don't know these people. Turned out all three of them had Alzheimer's disease.
So it tells me that being a pastor and being a deacon, you're baptized by fire, believe me.
I never would have thought of that until it happened later on that they were all diagnosed.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Molly. Okay, let's listen to a little bit more about the genetics and the family portion of this.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
So that tells us that genetics plays a very small part in Alzheimer's. If you have 6 million people, probably 250,000 of them is caused by genetics. If you talk about risk doesn't mean that you're going to get it, but you're at greater risk. If your parents had hypertension, it doesn't mean you're going to get hypertension, but you're at greater risk of that. So I think we need to get those two distinctions together. However, if you are carrying one of the genes, that's a totally different story. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I have a
Yes.
quick question.
Yes.
The doctor's name was Alzheimer, right?
Yes.
Was this disease named after him? Did he, do all the studying and he maybe found the disease?
Yeah, he
and
did.
discovered it?
In the early 1900s,
Okay.
Dr. Aloysius Alzheimer's was the founder. He had a patient that had all this symptoms. Yeah, good question. Thank you. Okay, here's another risk factor. Hispanic, or 1.5 times more likely than whites to develop Alzheimer's than other dementias, which is pretty much similar to the African Americans, about twice as likely, because although the Hispanic is usually a cultural difference as far as speech or the language, we find that with African Americans there are other factors that are affecting it, and that happens to be disparities like not being able to go to the doctor. That could be very suspicious because of the Tuskegee experiment that they had in the 1950s, where they did a lot of experiments. So there's quite a pushback when it comes to why people of minorities are subsequently afraid of getting involved in seeking help. People who smoke a lot probably could end up with some form of dementia. Because what happens is when you smoke, you got that primary smoke goes in and it's constricting the vessels in your brain, minimizing the amount of blood going to the brain. Or secondary smoke, if you're in a car with someone that they smoke. Or third-hand smoke, if you go to somebody's house and there's smoke in their drapes or everything. So the moral of that story is that if you're smoking, I suggest that maybe another habit, maybe, or if you have somebody around you, be careful with the smoke. Diabetes is another factor. Untreated diabetes, we're finding out that is associated with Alzheimer's or some form of dementia, as well as lack of exercise. Molly talked about the different type of foods that we eat. All of those things are contributing to some form of dementia. And here's a key one here, especially for you ladies. This is something that we're just finding out. Out of the 6 million people, 2/3 of the Americans with Alzheimer's are women. I used to say, oh, it's because women live longer than men. But Maria Shriver was saying something a little different. She said, no, not necessarily. It's because it could be hormonal. You know, it could be people have estrogen, not estrogen, you know, they've lost estrogen. So all these things are factors, and in addition to that, these women with Alzheimer's, 1/3 of them are being cared for by their daughters. So there's a double whammy there. Women are more likely to get it, and then their daughters are the caregivers. All right? Okay. Molly, can you talk to me? We're going to see here in just a minute. Oh, we're not going to recap here. Okay, Molly.
I guess I am.
Yes, she is. Okay. Any questions that she's coming forward? You're a great audience, but I'm not, how do I send my great-grandchildren to college if you're not asking questions?
Yeah, that 50% goes a long way. Okay, I'm going to talk about the stages of Alzheimer's disease. And sometimes people say there's 7 stages or 12 stages. We'll talk about 3 stages. Just keep it simple. And so, go ahead, Liz.
Okay, here's the thing.
Okay, so we're going to listen to some people that talk about what it's like to be living with Alzheimer's. And they give us a little bit of a feeling of what being in their shoes is like.
It's a different kind of forgetting. It really, really is. It's not just forgetting where I put my car keys. It's much deeper than that. And for example, I cannot read a book. I used to be a voracious reader because by the time I turned a page, I had forgotten what I had read. And if you're reading a novel, you have to know what transpired before it in order for you to continue to read on. And so I can't read a novel, so I've even stopped trying.
Losing the words.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. You know, I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've taught with words my entire life. You know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
Word finding. He's having difficulty finding the words what to say.
I'm like an overachiever that's and when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and just changed it last week. And you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more, and they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times, to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
And one of the frustrations that a patient has said to me is that it takes so much energy just to talk, trying to find the words. But this is a continuum, it's trying to get ahead of it. Asymptomatic, that's the first category. No cognitive symptoms, but there might be possible changes in the brain, like I said, it starts 10 to 20 years before you see symptoms. And then what we call MCI, or mild cognitive impairment. That's an early stage of cognitive ability loss. But then the 3 stages that I want to talk about are the mild, moderate, and severe. Now the moderate stage, a lot of people are still working. They may take more notes and have more post-its and have more reminders and keep a tighter calendar. And may need some help with some things, but they're still able to manage and do most of the things. I had a relative that probably was in the early stage. He was still working, drove to work one day, forgot that he drove, walked home, and thought someone stole his car. But his family knew, and so they knew he drove. So they went back and got his car for him. I doubt that he worked much after that. And then that stage is about 2 years. And then the moderate stage is the longest stage, it's 8 to 10 years. That's the longest one. As a steady decline from the things in the early stage, forgetting memory, forgetting, how to do things. But the symptoms are more pronounced and they interfere with many daily activities. They begin to lose the ability, this is a person that loses the ability to find a way home, whether they're walking or driving. And they can't find a way, they can't find a way home. They may normally go to the store and be back in half an hour. Now 3 hours later, they're still not back because they just can't figure out how to get there. And so they need more help in taking care of themselves, washing, bathing, laying out their clothes, knowing what clothes are appropriate for what season of the year. They may not be able to hold a conversation. They may withdraw from activities that they used to enjoy. They may not want to come to church anymore because they just feel kind of awkward. But one thing that they do like at church is singing. So even though they may not be able to talk to you, they will know the words to all the familiar songs because that's one of the last areas of the brain to be lost. And so, we used to work with the ushers and things at church to let them know that it was important for them to understand, even if the person came with an aid and scrubs, just be patient with them and they would be so joyous when they could sing the song. So that's good. But it's a stage where they gradually lose their ability to do anything and can't take care of themselves. And they're more likely to get lost, wander out of the house. We're not sure all the reasons why they do that. In my own brain, I think it's because they're looking for something familiar. So it's called retrogenesis. So think of yourself if you're 90 or 80 years old and you start going back in the years. And so say now you're 20, because that's what happened to one of our friends. We knew he was in his 20s, it was because before he went to medical school, he was talking about his brother who had died, so we knew that's where he was. And so one of my family members left the house. Now, his wife had put all kinds of locks and everything on the doors and windows and everything. He took the door off the hinges. Gotta be careful. He took the door off the hinges and he ended up at his childhood home, which I could understand. Can you imagine if you look around, you know what it's like when you wake up in a hotel room that first second and you don't know exactly where you are, but it's only a second. Can you imagine waking up like that every day and not knowing where you are? So he was kind of looking for something familiar and he knew how to get to his childhood home. But fortunately there was nobody there. His family got there and got him home.
Can I do a story also?
Yes.
Molly's talking about a very prominent physician where we came from. And we would go over serve communion at the nursing homes. And we would have the speakerphone on the phone so he could hear his brother, who was in another state. And after the conversation, he said, "Was that my brother Bob?" I said, "Yes, that was your brother Bob."
It was an attorney.
He was an attorney. And he said, what's his number, phone number? And I told him his home phone number. And not thinking, I said, "And his cell number is," and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, he's incarcerated?" So this tells me that people with Alzheimer's can be very concrete. So you gotta watch what you say. You can't say, "I'm gonna run down to the store." Or you can't say, "Jump up here on the bed," because that's exactly what they'll do.
Yeah. But, so the modern stage is along, by the time, and there's no clear-cut lines between the stages, but by the time they are leaving that moderate stage and going into severe, they're not able to do hardly anything for themselves. So they get into the severe stage, and the symptoms interfere with most activities of daily living, and that's usually about a 2-year period, depending on their health and whether they get pneumonia or other infections that may cause their death. They eventually forget how to swallow, and that's one of the things that happens. Yes, sir.
What did you say the normal range for the moderate?
8 to 10 years. Yeah, 8 to 10 years. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. We got running out of time here. Uh-oh. I'm gonna have to try this again. Okay. Oh, now we're going to skip that recap and move on to FDA-approved treatments. Things are progressing very rapidly here, and it's kind of exciting. So, Dr. Alzheimer's discovered the disease in 1906. It took 90 years before the first medication was developed, and that's Aricept, which a lot of you have probably heard of, and is still prescribed. And remember, I'm not going to say there's no treatment, because as we go down there, it's changed. But we used to say there's no treatment, that this just takes care of the symptoms, and this does take care of the symptoms. Exelon is pretty similar to Aricept, and then Razidine is another one. And the one thing about most of these medications, they have GI symptoms. You probably remember as a nurse, they have GI symptoms. So people have stomach aches and diarrhea, and a lot of people don't want to take them because of those symptoms. And then Amanda is for behaviors. When people start acting out. And behavior is a sign of unmet need. It's a disease, it's not the person. They don't mean to be the way they are, but it's a disease. And then now we're getting to 2014, he always says to pronounce this for me. Okay. Anyway, now in 2021 was the first drug that actually was for treatment. And that one was the one that was on the controversy because it was like $26,000 a year, $56,000 a year, and finally they took it off they stopped using it because of brain bleeds. Okay, so that was in 2021. 2022, last year, lecanemab came out. And that one, they're still using that for treatment, except Medicare doesn't pay for it, but the VA does. So if you know of a veteran that is in very, very early stage, they may be able to get treatment using this medication. All of those before 2021 were pills. Now it's infusion. And I think this is the way of the future because it's going to be medication that's specifically described for that person. So, my Alzheimer's may be different than somebody else's Alzheimer's. So my cocktail of medication is going to be prescribed exactly for me, which is the way they do infusions. And so it's going to be very specific for the individual. That's what they're going. Now, Eli Lilly, this year, 2 to 3 more medications are going to be released for Alzheimer's, for treatment. So this is all new, and we're moving forward, and I'm excited about that. Okay, now we're going to look at, talk to the healthcare provider. Okay, now this is a big one. For most of us, the doctors that we had all of our life may not be the best one to talk to about Alzheimer's disease. A lot of them will, some of them will refer you to a specialist, and if you're 65 and older, you're entitled to a free annual cognitive examination. It's free. A lot of the doctors won't even tell you or know about it. But the thing of it is, they can't do anything else during that visit.
That's true.
Yeah, and they can't do anything else. In the first year we did our Medicare 65 exam, they paid us $25 to do it. I was like, that's weird. You know, they're paying us to do it. But at least it gives you a baseline. And then you go once a year, separate from your other primary care appointments, and you can compare, what's going on. And so you talk to your healthcare provider, and if you are having problems, you need to see a neurologist, a geriatrician, a psychiatrist, somebody that specializes in things with the brain. A lot of times your regular doctor will not know what to do. And sometimes they dismiss people. We know of someone that she was diagnosed probably 13 years ago now, and when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, her doctor told her, go home, don't tell anybody, just go home, take it easy. I mean, she owned a nursing company and everything, but they were smart enough not to stop there. And she went for treatment. But doctors aren't always on top of it because they don't know. Okay, so advancing Alzheimer's research. Okay, so they're looking at investigating early intervention.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease as a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories. Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
Exciting.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day. And I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
Okay, so kinds of studies.
Participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be one of the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
You might hear the phrase negative trial, which means it didn't hit the endpoint. It didn't result in an FDA-approved treatment for the disease. But I think the only negative trial is one that doesn't provide us with valuable information. If the trial is well designed and is a good scientific experiment,
we can get extremely valuable data that can help plan the next trial and make it even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even prevention. By participating in clinical research, you can move us toward methods of treatment and prevention for all those affected by this devastating disease. Alzheimer's Association Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service for those with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers. To start, simply create a confidential user profile and receive a list of studies that may be a match for you. Don't just hope for a cure, help us find one.
As you can see on that map, Alzheimer's associations are all over our country. And our mission, the Alzheimer's Association, leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's and other dementia. Well, I've been doing these presentations for, what, 25 years?
We've been married 112 years, that's 56 apiece.
Okay, because you did know. I'll sort of get for it. Oh, okay, any questions? Any questions?
Yeah, so is it Reagan staff down at IU, has done a lot of research in this, and they've had, I know I did a clinical trial with them several years ago, when they were, before, you know, they came out with the seniors thing. That was the same questionnaire and questions that we do every year now, you know, for the seniors. So are they still involved in clinical trials, and is there any specific way that locally that people can sign up?
Yeah, actually, we're not associated with Regan Street. Regan Street is what you're speaking of. We're at the Indiana Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, and I think there are different research studies going on there. What you did years ago is more advanced today than because we learned so much more. You know, so.
And where I go annually is at IU for my cognitive testing and everything. I go once a year. Got my letter yesterday, said, okay. Right. But this 1-800 number is my favorite number. It's the Alzheimer's helpline. It never ever closes. They get most of their calls between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning because that's when caregivers can have time, you know, to make a phone call. And it's staffed by master level social workers. And so they can help answer your questions. If you have a loved one that's in another state and you just give the zip code, they can give you the resources for that area. They can mail materials to you or just talk to you. A lot of people just have questions, they don't know what to do, and so they can talk to you. And of course, you can go online and learn things, and then there are nationwide communities. But, yeah. Yes?
I can vouch for the 1-800 number because I had a scary episode happen last week, and I was really surprised at how hesitant I was to talk to anybody around me about it. And I was like, I went down the rabbit hole with it, and I called that number. I work for Socoa, so I give that number to clients all the time. So it was like twofold. So I got a chance to see how it works, so I can actually say it is a good line to call. But she was able to talk me off the ledge.
Yes, see, that's beautiful. Yes, Socoa. Love Socoa.
Yeah. As we close here, I just want to thank you, first of all, for inviting us here. Again, I think I know where I am now. I'm among friends. I think I'm among friends, you know, so that's all that we need to know. But the other thing I'd like to say, if you're caregivers here, take care of yourself. Let me tell you what that looks like. That means getting enough rest, at least 7 to 8 hours of rest. And some people laugh at themselves, come but it's important that you get rest. Because if you're not getting rest, what happens is that you will mimic dementia. You won't remember things, you will be confused, so make sure you get enough rest. Secondly, eat properly. Thirdly, make sure you keep your doctor's appointments. And finally, is make sure you get a team that's working with you. You can't do it by yourself, believe me, you can't do it. We find out people that are caregivers, if they are not adhering to the things I just mentioned, usually will die first before their loved ones. But, Brother Pastor, thanks for it and being here, because I think pastors should hear this. I think deacons, I don't know if you're deacons here or not, but I think you should. Okay, they should. How can we minister to people who don't know these things that are going on within their homes? But it's our pleasure being here tonight. And I'll turn it back over to you, Paul.
One other thing, Pastor, I have a caregiver manual I can give to you, because you have questions about caregivers, and we didn't really address it. So, my suitcase is out by the door, so it's in there, right?
We read it initially when we first started.
All right. Well, thank you both, again, Molly and Ralph. Really, really appreciate you both being here. And we're really blessed we got to get 2 for 1. So, or actually 3 for 1. So thank you so much.